welcome to another Let's Talk podcast, produced and brought to you by Hazel and Betty Ford. I'm your host, William C. Moyers, and today we're joined by Carrie and Dustin Brockberg, who have written an important and insightful book, End Your Covert Mission, a veteran's guide to fighting pain and addiction, coming out now. Carrie Brockberg is a licensed psychologist working in the field of rehabilitation with a focus on individuals with chronic pain, brain injury, and other chronic illnesses and disabilities. Dustin Brockberg is a licensed psychologist working in the field of substance use and co-occurring disorders at Hazel and Betty Ford. In other words, he's my colleague. And Dustin served in the United States Army from 2004 to 2008, including a deployment in Iraq. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Tell us a little bit about your experience in Iraq.
So when I went into the military, I joined as a tanker. So my fun joke is I fit into a tank, so small enough to fit into it. But I joined out of really just a cause of wanting to serve my country, and that cause just continued when I left the military and wanting to still serve my country and serve those that were wanting to heal. And so a big part of it with this book is continuing to want to serve and wanting to help those that are trying to heal from their time in the military and those that are struggling with substance use, chronic pain, emotional pain, all those things.
And Carrie, where did you get your interest in pain management and in chronic pain?
So my background is working with folks with disabilities, and right out of school I decided which group should I work with, and kind of came into the pain world, had a lot of experience and training from my PhD program, and it just kind of fell in my lap, and I've been working, it's been 3 or 4 years now, working with folks with chronic pain and different disabilities, so yeah.
And for the record, we talked about this off camera, but you all are new parents of twins.
Yep.
So good thing that those twins came after you decided to write this book, right?
They were actually, I was pregnant during the time we were writing, so it's funny to, I don't know, they're here now. Yep.
So, very good timing.
Yeah. So tell us about the book. What prompted it?
I think one big reason was just a simple gap. There's just a huge hole in the literature, in the world of trying to bridge substance use, mental health, chronic pain, all into one book, into one source. I think there's also a huge issue of academia trying to understand, trying to explain, and talk to veterans in a way that they can understand, that they can connect to big topics, big psychological ideas, big medical terms, that there's always some kind of a disconnect. And so our book is really more about, we're going to talk to you like a person. We're going to swear. We're going to be honest. We're going to just give you some honest tools, ways to think about your world, and give it to you straight. And that's a big part of what this book is hoping to do, is just to kind of meet them where they are, give them some new tools, but also throw away some really crappy ones that worked for a while.
Now, the book is specific to veterans, but pain management and chronic pain is a issue for lots and lots of people. What is the challenge of managing chronic pain? Never mind the veterans for a moment, but just in general. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that the hardest thing about having chronic pain is how long it is, the longevity of it. We're pretty programmed as humans to process acute pain, which is, you break your arm and you go get your cast, you're done in 6 to 8 weeks, and you move forward, whereas chronic pain is pain persisting over time, and a lot of people don't understand that, especially within the veteran community. There's kind of this perception of how do you still have that pain? How are you still experiencing that? Why is that not done? You got that while you were serving. So it's something that is very universal, but definitely more specific to veteran community.
And of course, the whole issue of chronic pain and its management is part of the reason why we have an opioid epidemic in this country, because the panacea at one time was, here's another script for 60 Percocets. And that doesn't necessarily work.
Right. So our book is really trying to help folks understand different strategies aside from medication management. We do talk about medication management. Sometimes it's very appropriate. Sometimes it's something that veterans need to continue on with, and we definitely talk about talking to your provider. But our book definitely focuses on, probably over 100 different strategies on how to manage pain without meds.
And I want to come back to that in just a minute
Yeah.
on some of those strategies, but I'm interested in the title of the book, specifically the emphasis on end your covert mission.
So as you alluded to that aside from just veterans, this book is geared toward veterans. It's geared towards those that maybe have learned to hide their pain, that have learned to go forth in their mission despite pain, that have learned that it's very important to finish their mission despite any consequences that have happened, that if you're bleeding, if you're wounded, if you're hurt, the mission comes first. How many folks do you know that have been told family comes first, right? No matter what, family comes first. Their kids come first. Everybody else comes first, right? Those are all missions that we've been told in our life. Veterans have similar missions. And so this book is a way to reprogram, rethink about that mentality that we want to end this mission, that everything else comes first, that we can actually start a new mission, that you come first, that you can actually heal, that you can actually start a new world in your life. But that might mean that we have to put down some of these old missions that you've been taught, which includes this idea that you don't show pain, you don't talk, you don't show emotion, all those things that a lot of veterans have subscribed to, that have been told that is normal. And I wouldn't even say just veterans subscribe to that. I would say many folks struggling with substance abuse subscribe to that. I would say a lot of folks in certain genders, races, ethnicities, ability statuses, all kinds of different groups have subscribed to those ideas.
And so what feeds into that is the shame and the stigma.
Absolutely.
Right? We all know shame and stigma around mental illness and addiction, but if you're a veteran, it's heightened even more, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a whole different cohort that takes it to almost a deeper level because of the stigma and the shame that kind of comes associated with that. And even the idea, and we actually talk about this in the book as well, of the idea of needing to be mentally ready, that if we're not ready, if we're not able to go on in the mission, we're failing the person next to us. And so we can't not be good to go. And that is a whole different mentality that we have to get rid of.
Is the issue of chronic pain one of physical chronic pain, or is there also or do you address in the book the issue of trauma and those other sorts of pain that might not be a pain that manifests itself in an elbow and a knee or a neck?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that up because that's a big part of our book is trying to dismantle the idea that pain is just physical.
Yes.
So we talk about physical pain, emotional pain, and social pain in our book. Physical pain is something that's a little easier to broach for veterans because just the concept of, this is what happened when I was serving, and Dustin even talks about how sometimes it can be like an honor to experience, some sort of battle wound, I think is what we
a Purple Heart.
Yeah, sure. Right. So we talk about physical pain, of course, but also the emotional and social pain. A lot of veterans experience issues with grief, and I think we talk about grief and loss from a mental health standpoint, but we really don't categorize it as like a pain experience. And this is going to help folks kind of relearn that. And then socially, like getting back and leaving the military, coming into different communities, your family, your work. I've worked with a lot of vets that it's hard. It's really difficult to integrate back into communities that don't understand or have the same value system as when you were in the military. So, so we're really talking about pain from more of a holistic, we call it
across the spectrum.
Yep.
You call it what?
A biopsychosocial approach, which
Yes.
isn't new,
Yes.
but it's
Right.
something that might be new terms for veterans to hear, and we're excited about that. Yeah.
Why is it that our country, our government, our military has been has not been responsive to the needs of our service women and men when it comes to chronic pain or mental anguish.
We're going to need a whole other podcast. No, I'm kidding. I think there is something that is called the cohort effect that is important to think about. Statistics have come out just in the last couple of years that it's something like 56% of OIF, OEF, OND veterans, so the Iraq, Afghanistan veterans, utilize the VA system. So only about half.
Wow.
Right? Same thing happened with Vietnam, same thing happened with Korea, Gulf War, and this is a cohort effect. And so that's an interesting finding in the sense that a lot of veterans initially don't seek out help from the VA, which is the biggest healthcare system we use with the veterans initially. The VA has now shifted and has a lot of initiatives now to allow them to use care within their communities, to say, you know what, we're going to help you find the care you need, whether it's in the VA or elsewhere. And so I think the VA has done leaps and bounds trying to help. I think they really have. And I think it's just going to take more time, to be honest. And we're learning and learning and learning and more. I think just in the last 30 years, the more we've learned about mental health, about veterans actually speaking up and saying, hey, this is not working. Even things from Agent Orange to now what we're finding with Gulf War and like burn pits that just recently came out in the news of all I think just yesterday the Senate just passed a bill on healthcare with burn pits. That's amazing. That's awesome that they're actually getting ahead of it. And those are the kind of initiatives that we can actually change the narrative on catching these things ahead of a time versus waiting 20 years to then make initiatives to change healthcare for vets. So I think that the language is adjusting.
Pain has changed too. So thinking about it exactly how you brought that up, I think how pain is treated is definitely changed over time. So our understanding, increased research, understanding what opioids impact on the body. I mean, it's changed so much. So I think there's a bigger push because we have increased understanding now of how this is impacting.
And then going off that too, even nowadays, whether or not with COVID, one of the blessings of COVID, which is weird to say that, but one of the blessings of COVID is virtual care.
Yes.
A lot of veterans are rural, right? And so now there's so much more virtual care, virtual therapy, virtual neuropsych testing, whatever it is, that a lot of more veterans are now getting care from that perspective. And that's great. And before we didn't have as much of that. And now we actually have a lot more means to reach a lot more people. And so more healthcare systems are doing that. And that's another great way to actually get the people the help they need. So,
We don't want to give away what's in the book, but we want to talk about, just in a few minutes that we have left, a couple of your favorite. Carrie, we'll start with you. Give me two of the favorite steps. You said you have over 100 of them. What are two of the practical steps that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, the strategies. We call them our tangible next steps.
Yes.
So kind of at the end of each chapter, we provide actual things that vets can go and try and do. One of my favorite ones that we put in there is using your 5 senses. I think that's one that's really underutilized. Think about it, like we all have our 5 senses going on all the time. If we were tuned into it, we would all be on overload. But if we kind of intentionally think about, I'm going to utilize my 5 senses to help me relax in this moment. You wake up, you might have your cup of coffee. I know I did this morning with our twins. And you might not even think twice having that cup of coffee, but if you shift the brain over to, what am I smelling right now? What am I tasting? What do I feel? Going through those 5 senses to help you relax. Sometimes we see, and not just sometimes, but we notice that the body can calm down, and we talk about like the biology of how pain works in the body, and if we can relax the system, we can calm down that pain. So that's one of my favorite ones. I talk about that with my clients all the time, using the 5 senses. Do you want to do the other one, or?
Yeah, do one, Dustin.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorites?
Oh, well, I have a lot. So I would say another aspect that I would want to comment on would just be understanding more of naming, like veteran culture is a big one that I like to think about. And that is something that we don't really talk a lot about, and that's just kind of identifying kind of like where you actually identify your culture, where you identify where you actually seek help, like where you can actually think about where you find your support system, where you don't. I think one of the things that a lot of veterans identify is this idea of I can only get help from other veterans, right? And that's an interesting idea. And so one of the things that in our book that we talk about is how can we shift that narrative to also find other communities that we can seek help from.
Yes.
And so one of the tangible next steps that we talk about is broadening that perspective to increase your support system, still honoring the fact that many veterans can share and understand your narrative, but there's also a lot of veterans that also might not understand your narrative, right? And so being able to kind of broaden that perspective can be really helpful.
It makes sense that this book is going to be published by Hazelden's Publishing because our mission is to help people, but we've come to the game sort of late in terms of recognizing what veterans specifically need. What are we doing these days to help veterans besides publish your book?
Well, the VA is taking a lot, you brought this up earlier, Dustin, but the VA is taking a lot of steps specifically to help with pain and pain reduction, a lot of education, a lot of helping providers understand the circumstances for vets, helping vets understand, pain and addiction. I would say that's a big thing for the VA specifically.
Yeah, I would say within the context of Hazelden, I know Hazelden recently is also publishing a mindfulness meditation book that's coming out here alongside our book. I don't know if it's in the same time frame, but that's going to be great. Different meditations from other veterans that are kind of being published. I also know we know accepting a lot of TRICARE, different insurances to get more veterans in our doors, which is wonderful. Which previously was a big issue for a lot of just getting the care that you need. I know there's new support systems, new support groups coming out as well. There's a lot of new AA and NA groups coming out that are veteran specific. I also have heard some rumors that there's even some partnerships with the VA and Hazelden kind of coming out as well, which is kind of cool.
And of course, we have a chief medical officer, Dr.
We
Alta
do,
Daru,
yeah.
who is a naval aviator, a veteran of many missions. And I think having her leading from that perspective as a CMO will be beneficial as well.
Absolutely.
But your book is going to be critical, and who do you hope will read this book?
All vets. All vets, and anyone that is connected to a veteran. I think, my unique perspective, I'm not a veteran myself, but being the wife of a veteran has been so eye-opening. We talk a little bit about our story of, learning his stories and me asking questions, and I think it could be beneficial for anyone that's connected to a veteran. Even folks with chronic pain that are not veteran identified, they probably could benefit too. There's a lot of great content in there. So.
And Dustin, what about a clinical audience?
I would say again, along with veterans, would definitely benefit reading this book. But I think many folks that genuinely, to my point earlier, that struggle to let out their pain, that understand, that maybe don't want to show what's going on underneath, can be really helpful to understand this book. Because yes, we are using the veteran audience as a way to kind of talk about this, but there's a lot of good strategies in there that anyone that just struggles to just talk about their stuff can be really helpful to understand this book. I would also say anyone that has a member that is a family member that is a veteran, anyone that is a clinician, that working with veterans, that working with substance use, could really benefit from this book. But a lot of times we also just have people that have family members that are veterans, and that can still be helpful to understand that perspective. So I think there's a lot of folks that can benefit reading our book.
So Dustin, we got to go, but before we do, what's your message of hope to veterans and their families who are tuning in today?
My message to every veteran that's listening to this is to take a chance, to allow themselves some grace, to read this book, to maybe allow one message to hit home, to see if maybe they can put down one piece of gear that maybe no longer is working, and let one new piece of gear maybe change their life, right? It doesn't take a lot of gear to change, but if they can put down one thing and turn something in, it can maybe make a big difference in their life, that they don't have to go their entire life with pain. That's my hope for them.
Thanks for that message of hope, and indeed, maybe those veterans can put down a piece of gear and pick up a new piece of gear, an asset, your new book, out now. Thank you, Dustin and Carrie, for being with us today. And thanks to all of you for joining us. On behalf of our executive producer, Lisa Stangl, and the Cracker Jack team at Blue Moon Productions, we're grateful that you joined us for this Let's Talk podcast. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. Treatment works. Recovery is real. Take good care, and we'll see you again.